One of the best things about animation compared to live action is how colorful animated movies can be. From the eye-popping comic book style flourishes in Spider-Verse, to the delightfully daunting pink elephants in Dumbo, color makes animated worlds both realistic and exaggerated at the same time. Color is so important to cartoons that it's hard to imagine a time without it. Yet animation hasn't always been color. Up until the early 1930s, animated cartoons were black and white. It wouldn't be until a young Disney studio decided to take a chance with new technology that animation, and film in general, would start the move to color. On today's edition of Multiplaned, we're taking a look at the very first full-color animated movie, and really, the very first full-color movie in general, Flowers and Trees. In the early years of animation, black and white was the universal standard for cartoons, and cinema as a whole. Color wasn't an option until the mid-1920s, and even then it was way too expensive so as to be practical. The color offered in those years wasn't even true color, but rather two-color Technicolor. Technicolor, the company behind color film, used its limited two-color technology on a few live-action movies, and even a couple of animated cartoons, well before Disney's first shot at color. Yes, that's right, there were color cartoons before Disney did them. Now, before going further, it's important to explain the difference between two-color Technicolor, which Disney did not do first, and full-color Technicolor. Two-color Technicolor was a system where a red and green film strip were combined into one almost full-color strip. Two-color films produced bright reds, greens, and browns, but they couldn't fully recreate whites, blues, and yellows, and many other colors were distorted. It wasn't perfect, but the two-color process was used in many live-action films in the late 1920s and early 30s. It was used in a small number of animated cartoons too. The most notable example is a cartoon from 1930, titled Fiddlesticks, from former Disney animator Ub Iwerks. It was the first two-color animated film, and by extension, the first cartoon to be released in some form of color. As you can see, there's something off about the two-color system. It's a very restrained process, with muted blues, purples, and yellows, and grainy whites. This wasn't full color. At least, not yet. In 1932, Technicolor released a new system, where a blue strip was added to the red and green ones. This fixed the problems with the two-color system. Blues were blue, whites were white, and there was no distortion. This system is known as full-color Technicolor, and the company knew it had something big on their hands. Full-color cameras for live action weren't yet built, so the president of Technicolor, Herbert Kalmus, decided to test out the system on animated films. Mr. Kalmus contacted various studios in the hopes of having them try out three-strip Technicolor. But he had no luck. No studio would take him up. The general feeling was that cartoons were good enough in black and white. See, much like today, animated movies back then were expensive, even without color. And what's more, for most distributors, animation was at the bottom of their priority list. The major studios like Universal and Warner Brothers weren't prepared to allocate more money to their animation departments, of all places. Luckily for Mr. Kalmus, the young Walt Disney Studio was independent, and more importantly, forward-thinking. The Disney Company was the first to try out the three-strip full-color system. After the debut of Mickey Mouse in late 1928, Walt Disney and his team were advancing the art of animation at a breakneck pace. In addition to the Mickey Mouse cartoons, the company was producing the Silly Symphonies, an anthology series designed to experiment with new animation techniques. Walt's goal with the Silly Symphonies was to make the animated world more and more realistic. To move animation from simple moving drawings to being a caricature of life itself, based in the real world and expanding on it. You can imagine how important color would be for that mission. The studio had made some primitive attempts at colorizing cartoons, mainly by printing them on colored film. This cartoon, a silly symphony titled Night, was printed on blue film, for example, to give it an atmospheric feel. The experiment clearly didn't work. Having said that, it's easy to see why Walt was so excited when Mr. Kalmus presented full-color Technicolor in the spring of 1932. It was the next big step animation would take. Around this time, the studio was producing a black and white silly symphony titled Flowers and Trees, a nature-themed cartoon. Walt didn't particularly like the cartoon and was prepared to start it from scratch, until he had the idea to use it for the Technicolor experiment. The addition of color gave Flowers and Trees new life. Backgrounds were repainted and action was restaged. The studio lab developed a special paint that wouldn't crack off the film stock. The reworking of Flowers and Trees did a number on the studio's finances. The cartoon went way over budget, worrying Walt's brother Roy, the studio's CEO. In fact, Roy nearly stopped the whole project. Disney quality was expensive to maintain, even in black and white, so Technicolor's expensive technology did no favors. In the end, Walt forced Flowers and Trees through production. The silly symphonies were in a bit of a slump in 1932. They were being sidelined by the Mickey cartoons, and Walt could see something needed to be done. Color was how he planned to re-establish the symphony's popularity. Roy finally agreed to convert the series to color, but only after Technicolor gave the Disney company 2 years of exclusivity with the full color process. Color had a major impact on Flowers and Trees. The short was about 2 trees falling in love before an evil tree interferes and wreaks havoc in the forest. It was a simple enough plot, but the real magic was in how the animators showed off the beautiful Technicolor system. The forest is brought to life with lush greens and bright blue skies, which just wasn't possible in the 2-color system. Brilliant reds and oranges make the fire look extra destructive. To top it off, the short ends with a full-color rainbow, just a flex on all the black and white competition. If you compare Flowers and Trees with other silly symphonies released that year, you can see a noticeable improvement in animation quality. Walt really did mean for this to be the revival of the series. Flowers and Trees premiered at Grauman's Chinese Theater on July 30, 1932. It was an instant success, becoming the most popular silly symphony up to that point. Audiences packed theaters and industry figures hailed the full-color film. At the Academy Awards later that year, Flowers and Trees won the first award for Best Animated Short Film. The cartoon made back its inflated budget, and then some, leading Walt to declare all future silly symphonies were to be made in color. As we'll see in future editions of Multiplaned, the later silly symphonies achieved even better usage of Technicolor, along with a host of other innovations. Flowers and Trees left an impact on the rest of cinema as well. Other animation studios were quick to introduce color themselves, but the Disney exclusivity with full-color Technicolor meant they had to use other systems. The competition had to settle for 2-strip Technicolor, or cheap alternatives like the 2-color Cinecolor system. The cartoon also caused a rush of interest for color in live-action movies too. Of course, it would be many years before color was dominant, but Flowers and Trees gave it the spotlight again. Today, nearly 90 years after its release, Flowers and Trees remains one of Disney's most popular short cartoons. It directly led to even more celebrated work by Disney. Its innovation of full color took animation to new heights, and encouraged live action to colorize as well. It was even part of a small group of classic cartoons included on Disney Plus when it launched last year. If you somehow haven't seen it yet, I'll leave a link in the description below. I can't recommend it enough. Flowers and Trees is the first time color was fully expressed in film, animated or not. It's so cool watching it and knowing you're seeing history in the making. Well, that's all I have to say about that. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Multiplaned, and I'm so grateful to be able to share one of my favorite cartoons with you. Join me in future editions where we go over even more Silly Symphonies and see how they change the landscape of animation. Well, that's about it. I hope you have a swell day, and I'll see you later.